Are you looking for all the latest pro football news and content? Of course you are. Who doesn't love football? The question is, how do you get all the latest pro football news and content? There's so many different pro football podcasts on the internet. Which one do you choose? Which one is the right fit for you? Well, you go with the Cross the Middle Show, one of the fastest growing football podcasts out right now. Over the past year, we've climbed the Spotify rankings and become a show you have to listen to if you're a football fan. Find out if the Ravens will go all the way with Odell Beckham Jr. Find out if the Eagles did enough to make it back to the Super Bowl. You'll get all of our best stories for just $1 per month. All you have to do is sign up by clicking the link in the episode description box. I'm John Kuzma. Welcome back to another episode of the Cross the Middle Show. We're going to recap the Eagles and Vikings game in this latest episode. So let's get right to it. We're going to start with maybe the player that stood out the most in this game, DeAndre Swift. Now, we didn't see a lot of this when DeAndre Swift was with the Lions, but he's on the Eagles now, and it's a completely different story. DeAndre Swift did a great job of running downhill. The Eagles just kept running the football right at the Vikings defense. Nothing fancy, just straight ahead runs. And DeAndre Swift just kept chopping up the Vikings defense and really took it to them. He did a good job running downhill. He was doing a good job of cutting back and running towards daylight, finding the openings of this defense. And really, the Vikings didn't have an answer for him. He really took over this football game. It was an impressive night for DeAndre Swift. And like I said, the Eagles' rushing attack is a juggernaut. They got that offensive line. They have a stable running backs. It was DeAndre Swift and Rashad Penny in this game. A little bit of Boston Scott, too. So those were the running backs that the Eagles went with, and it seemed like they all had success because the Vikings just were they couldn't match up. The Eagles were too physical. They got beat at the point of attack. They lost at the line of scrimmage, and the Eagles running backs were able to take advantage, particularly DeAndre Swift, who had a huge night for this Eagles offense. Another guy that really stepped up was Devonta Smith. Devonta Smith early on in the game goes deep, jumps up, elevates above the defender, has a great catch, maintains his concentration throughout the process of that catch. Great job. Broke free for another touchdown, cooked the Vikings deep. Jalen Hurts gave him a great throw, hit Devonta Smith in stride. Deep touchdown. I think it was over 70 yards if I'm correct. Don't quote me on that, though. But overall, just a great night for Devonta Smith. Always came up big for Jalen Hurts and for the Eagles offense. Seemed to always answer the call when the team needed him. So many big plays came from Devonta Smith in this game. He was the clear-cut number one wide receiver in this game, and it appears to be the number one wide receiver on the Eagles this year, to the point where, A.J. Brown's becoming a little bit frustrated, which we'll talk about in a minute. But Devonta Smith, great night for him. Clearly getting better. Remember there was doubts whether or not he would be able to play in the NFL because, he's a little bit undersized when it comes to his weight. Well, I guess that is not the truth at all. And we have an answer to those doubters. They were wrong about Devonta Smith, and everything we saw that made him a Heisman Trophy winner in college at Alabama has translated to the NFL. The shiftiness, the ability to run deep, past the secondary, the strides that he takes. Those are the things that make, Devonta Smith such a elusive route runner, a guy that always gets big separation. It's tough for these defenders to stay on his hip because he's so fluid. So him being a little bit undersized actually works in his favor because he's lighter on his feet than a lot of these other receivers are. And they can't keep up with him. These defenders get lost. They don't have an answer for Devonta Smith. Like I said, these first two games, he's really taken over for this Eagles offense. Jalen Hurts just keeps looking his way because he knows that Devonta Smith is going to come through for him. Clearly, he's earned Jalen Hurts' trust, and those two guys are delivering. They're delivering the goods for the Eagles offense. Through the first 2 games, they've been unstoppable, and we've yet to see a defense that can contain Devonta Smith and this Eagles passing attack. What happened, though, is because Devonta Smith was taken over so much that, A.J. Brown's feeling a little bit left out. And A.J. Brown, one of the big storylines is, A.J. Brown was having some words with Jalen Hurts on the sideline. And what's absolutely crazy about this is the Eagles were winning the game. I think it was like 27-14 or something like that. It was a 2-score game, I'm pretty certain at this point. I think it was 27-14. Don't quote me on the exact score. But the Eagles were up by 2 scores, and they were winning the game, and A.J. Brown's basically, having some choice words for Jalen Hurts on the sideline, basically saying, you got to get me the ball. You got to get me involved in this offense. And a lot of the Eagles fans didn't like the timing of it because they're winning the game, and A.J. Brown is basically thinking about his touches and why he's not involved and why he's not getting passes that are coming his way. It wasn't the best time for A.J. Brown to voice his frustration. You would like to see him wait until after the game and talk to Jalen Hurts in private, but he kind of feels like he's being left behind. Devonta Smith's getting all the passes. DeAndre Swift is getting all the carries. Those 2 guys were the focal point of the offense in this game. A.J. Brown did have a touchdown, but it got called back because of a penalty, and they tried to go deep to him again. It looked like he should have drew a pass interference call. They didn't get the call. It just didn't go A.J. Brown's night. It didn't go A.J. Brown's way tonight. But, that's the way it's going to be sometimes. Sometimes Devonta Smith and DeAndre Swift are going to have their way, and the rushing attack's going to play such a big factor in the game that someone's going to have to take a back seat a little bit. In this game, that was A.J. Brown, and he was upset about that. He felt like he should have got more passes that came his way. He felt a little left out in that first game, too, so he's frustrated after 2 games, and not a good sign for the Eagles because remember, this team was in the Super Bowl this past year, was very close to winning the Super Bowl, came up short against the Chiefs, couldn't get it done. But, A.J. Brown's such a key piece for this offense, and they're going to need him if they want a shot at making it back to the Super Bowl. If he's disgruntled and already unhappy about his lack of targets, I mean, that's something to keep an eye on. It's a storyline that definitely is going to go viral because everybody's wondering, is there tension now between Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown? Now, I think Jalen Hurts handled it the right way, tried to diffuse it. The Eagles head coach tried to diffuse it. And then Jalen Hurts started throwing to A.J. Brown right away, did his best to, just try to get him involved a little bit and, get him some action so he feels like he's a piece of the puzzle. It didn't turn out well for A.J. Brown, like I said, because the touchdown got called back. They took another shot to him deep, and the defender got there right as the ball was coming in and was able to break it up. So not what you want to see if you're an Eagles fan, because the last thing you want to see is A.J. Brown and the team start to have a disconnect to the point where, they're not on the same page and they're having these, arguments on the sideline that is actually hurting the team, especially when you look at it long term where all these guys are supposed to work together and bring the game plan to life. They got to execute out there on game day. And if they're frustrated, or if A.J. Brown is frustrated, I guess you can say, then that could, hurt their chances of going out there and executing when it matters. So we'll see if Jalen Hurts is able to get A.J. Brown involved earlier in the next game, whether or not he can do a good job of, satisfying, a guy that last year was the number 1 receiver. This year, it's definitely Devonta Smith, so at least through 2 games. But, A.J. Brown is too good to just get left behind to the point where he's, frustrated and having words with his quarterback on the sideline to the point where the head coach has to break things up. Like I said, they're going to need him for the long haul. And if he's unhappy in this offense, it's kind of hard for them to make everything happen, make all their goals happen, with the Super Bowl, getting back there and then hopefully winning it if you're the Eagles. It's hard to do that if A.J. Brown is completely checked out. It's not there yet, but it's deteriorating, obviously, or that situation on the sideline would not have happened. So just something to keep an eye on if you're an Eagles fan. Obviously, if you're a football fan, something to keep an eye on too. Can the Eagles, hold it together and maintain the morale that they've had? Because of Jalen Hurts, they've done such a good job of, being on the up and up and having an upbeat attitude, a real positivity that surrounds this team. Well, if A.J. Brown's unhappy, it's going to be hard to maintain that because, he wants the ball and he wants to be involved. And up until this point, it's been a concern for A.J. Brown. We're going to talk about the Vikings a little bit. If there's one good thing about the Vikings, they did fight back in the fourth quarter and, make it a close game. They didn't pack it in. They didn't roll over. They had a shot. And, if they get a few more breaks in this game, we'll talk about the Justin Jefferson touchback in a little bit. But, if that play goes the Vikings' way, this could be a totally different game. And we could be talking about the Vikings in this game and how well they performed. They did fight back, like I said, and they made it a game in the fourth quarter. Jordan Addison's a positive for them. The rookie Jordan Addison, he had a big play in this game. He scored a touchdown, so he's a guy that they can definitely count on, and he's got a bright future opposite of Justin Jefferson. So that's something that's positive for them. And, if Kirk Cousins has two weapons and he really does a good job of, taking advantage of those two weapons, the Vikings should be able to dig out of this hole and bounce back from this 0-2 deficit that they find themselves in through the first two games. Obviously, it's not the start they were looking for. They were a good football team this past year, but at the end of the year, they really started to nosedive a little bit. They started off really good. By the end of the year, they were starting to, like I said, take a nosedive and weren't as convincing as they were early on in the year. Well, now they start off 0-2, and now they're playing catch-up. They're behind, and they have to get things figured out. Kirk Cousins has to be better. He took some pressure from that Eagles defensive front. Obviously, every team that plays the Eagles has to deal with that defensive front, and they're usually overwhelmed, so that's expected. But when you're the Vikings, who see themselves as a contender and a team that has a chance at, being in the hunt, and now you're 0-2, you start looking around and trying to figure out what you guys have to do to get back on track. For them, it's about taking care of the football. I think about the Madison fumble that he had in this game. That wasn't good. You can't turn the ball over. And, the Justin Jefferson touchback, that's another one. Without those two giveaways, like I said, it might be a different story, and we might be talking about the Vikings as the victorious team in this game. Unfortunately, that didn't happen for the Vikings, or if you're a Vikings fan, just wasn't good enough. But positive, Jordan Addison did good. TJ Hockenson had some good plays. Really, Jordan Addison is the guy that I'm circling, though. The guy can play. That's clear as day. And if this is his first couple of games in the NFL at the highest level in football, and he's only going to get better from here, then you're starting to think, okay, the bar is really high for this guy, and he's going to be able to do some great things for this Vikings team. The other guy we have to talk about, Justin Jefferson, he was great in this game, excluding the fumble in the end zone. He basically had a touchdown. He fumbles. It gets ruled a touchback. The Eagles got the ball at the 20-yard line. That was a critical mistake for the Vikings in this game because they go from losing points, any points, even if they had to settle for a field goal because they got stuffed at the goal line, which they probably would have scored and got 6. But even if they got stuffed and the Eagles defense came up big, that would have been 3 points and would have gave them more energy, would have gave them more confidence to build off of. They lost all that when, Justin Jefferson fumbled the ball into the end zone and it got ruled a touchback. And like I said, they were on the 1 yard line. So the likelihood of them punching it in on a Madison run or some run down by the goal line was very high. It did happen, and it was basically the play that ruined this game for the Vikings, because that was a score that would have put them right in it to beat the Eagles. And unfortunately, it didn't happen for the Vikings. That's one Justin Jefferson would like to have back. He was still great in this game, went over 100 receiving yards, did a good job of just making a lot of big catches for the Vikings offense. There's nothing to be concerned about with Justin Jefferson. He played great in this game outside of that fumble into the end zone. That was the only play that really hurt him a little bit, hurt the team. But, sometimes those things happen in professional football. And when you're a great player like Justin Jefferson, you just have to bounce back from it. But it was a great job by Justin Jefferson in this game. So many catches, so many big plays, still the same old Justin Jefferson, over 100 yards in the first 2 games. He's still putting up the big numbers that we're used to seeing from this guy. He's still a mismatch for this Vikings offense. Nobody can cover him. Look, the wide receivers are not a problem for this Vikings team. You got Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. Those guys are impressive. They're both guys that produce for this offense. They're clearly the strength of this Vikings team. Kirk Cousins has the wide receivers that he needs to take his game to the next level. It's just the other positions that have to get better. If you're asking me, it was the defense that let them down in this game. If they need to find something that they need to get better at, it's stopping the run. The way the Eagles just lined up and ran simple run plays up the middle and were able to manhandle the Vikings defensive line, that's the thing that was the most concerning for me if I'm a Vikings fan, because they just were out-muscled at the point of the attack, and the Eagles didn't have to do anything fancy. It was just downhill running right at the Vikings defense, and the Vikings kept getting punched in the mouth, and there wasn't a damn thing they could do about it. They couldn't respond and throw a punch of their own. There was nobody that could step up and, contain DeAndre Swift and the rest of those Eagles running backs. And it seemed like every run got at least 6, 7, 8 yards, to the point where the Eagles kept finding themselves in favorable second down situations, favorable third down situations. So when they're 3rd and 4, 3rd and 3, 2nd and 4, 2nd and 3, it makes the possibility of converting on those later downs, 2nd down, 3rd down, much higher, because they're in favorable down and distances. And that's what the Eagles were able to do in this game, whether it was Jalen Hurts pulling the ball and running with the ball himself and, getting the first down, handing off to DeAndre Swift on a run right up the middle, or watching Swift bounce it to the outside. They just kept getting after the Vikings, and there was nothing the Vikings could do. So that's where the Vikings have to be better on the defensive side of the ball. Really, that's all I got for this latest episode of the Cross the Middle Show. Sign up for just $1 per month by clicking the link in the episode description box. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'm John Kuzma. I'm signing off.